How I became my own worst enemy in love. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. He walked out, and I realized I'd pushed him away. The sound of the door clicking shut felt polite and final, the kind of ending that doesn't even need a slam. I stood in the entryway staring at the grain of the wood as if I could read a different outcome there. My throat was raw from saying things in my sharpest voice, accusations honed by sleepless nights and looping suspicions. Just admit it, I'd said, and even as the words left me I could feel the gap widen. James didn't yell. He never did. He simply turned, face pale with a tired kind of disappointment, and walked. That quiet terrified me more than any argument. Fury meant someone was still fighting for the thing. Silence meant they were done. The apartment seemed to expand around me, our framed photos glinting like witnesses. I sank to the couch and stared at my phone. It buzzed on cue. Olivia, see? This is what I warned you about. Men keep secrets. I felt a hot pulse of gratitude and nausea. Gratitude because she knew how to land on the exact word that made me feel like a survivor. Nausea because that same word tied my stomach in knots. We'd been together 5 years, and I'd spent a rising portion of those years policing tiny tremors. A late reply, a turned-away shoulder, a work dinner that went late. I told myself vigilance was wisdom. I told myself that asking for reassurance was healthy. But the truth was uglier. Beneath my intuition lived a fear I didn't know how to name. The more afraid I felt, the more I tried to control outcomes. The more I tried to control, the more James went quiet. Tonight had followed the same pattern. A message pinged on his phone while we ate. He angled the screen away, or maybe he didn't. Maybe I imagined the angle, and I heard myself accuse him of hiding. He said it was his boss. I said prove it. He said he wouldn't live under interrogation. I demanded transparency, and he asked for trust. Then I said the line that kills love in slow motion. If you have nothing to hide, why are you so defensive? His face fell like a curtain. I picked up my phone and opened my messages to James, thumb hovering. My heart was thudding, my mind already rewriting the fight into a story where I was right and safe. Then another buzz. Olivia again, call me. I have something you should know. I didn't call. I put the phone down on the coffee table as if it were a live wire. I walked to the window. The sky over our street was navy and indifferent. From here, the shape of my life looked oddly tidy. The couch we chose together, the shelf of travel mugs I insisted on, the plant James watered because I always forgot. The calm felt like mockery. If he came back, I told myself, I would be different. I would listen. I would stop turning every unanswered text into a crime. I would mute Olivia. I would mute my own noise. But the door stayed shut, and the quiet kept growing, like a tide that didn't care who it took with it. I picked up my phone. A new notification flashed, not from Olivia, not from James. A number I didn't recognize, a sentence that made my scalp prickle. Before you blame him, check who's been feeding you the fire. We met in line at a bookstore cafe, the good kind that smelled like paper and cinnamon. He reached past me to grab a stir stick and apologized like a man trained in kindness. You first, he said, and I laughed because I already was first. It became a small joke, and then a bigger one, and then a date. James was easy in the ways that quiet people are easy. He remembered small details and asked questions that let you lay down your armor. I felt seen, which is the most addictive drug for the overlooked. Back then, I was a junior project coordinator with a planner full of color-coded tabs and a heart hungry for assurance. He was a civil engineer who could talk for 15 minutes about bridges without ever sounding boring. I like how you think, he told me once. I carried the sentence like a charm. The first year, trust was simply the air we breathed. We split chores, traded playlists, learned each other's grocery tells. He reached for my hand while crossing streets. He pressed his forehead to mine in silly elevator moments. When he said he needed a late night at work, I said, okay, text me when you're done. When I wanted him to meet my brother Matt, he said yes without calendar negotiations and brought the exact beer Matt loved. Trust started thinning in year 3, though it didn't feel like thinning then. It felt like adjusting. He got a promotion that filled his days with projects and his nights with just one more email. I got assigned to a manager whose feedback was a daily puzzle box. We both came home depleted. Where we'd once curled into each other, we began curling into our corners. Me with a podcast humming, him with his laptop lit like a second moon. It was nobody's fault and both our responsibilities. Then came my mother's surgery, and I spent 12 weeks living in the hospital clock. James showed up, rides, dinners, clean laundry folded without instructions, but I still felt alone in a new, brittle way. I wanted him to predict my needs. He wanted me to tell him plainly. We missed each other by inches that felt like miles. Somewhere in there, he made a joke at a friend's barbecue. Sarah never trusts anyone, not even the weather app. Laughter rolled through the yard, and I smiled because that is what you do when you're the punchline the room prefers. Later, in the car, I said it stung. He said, I was trying to be light, which is another way of saying, don't make me look mean. Once a person suggests you're distrustful, every action becomes a referendum. I began counting minutes. I scrutinized his phrasing. The first time he turned his phone upside down on the table, it registered like a siren. The first time he forgot to reply to a text for 2 hours, I built a narrative and filed it under evidence. He looked more tired. I got more vigilant. You're pulling back? I'd say. You're pulling me, he'd answer. Olivia entered the picture around then, an old friend from a volunteer group who always had time for tea and postmortems. She'd lift an eyebrow and say, men are patterns. They don't change, they just hide better. Her certainty slid into my bones. It felt like sisterhood. It was something else. When I replayed our timeline that night, I could see so many spots where I might have chosen curiosity over control. There are 100 ways to love a person. I chose the one that thought love could be ensured with surveillance. And yet, staring at my phone with that unknown text in my notifications, I had to admit something new. Maybe I wasn't the only author of my suspicion. I scrolled to the top of my thread with Olivia and watched our friendship develop in timestamps. At first it was sweet, photos of bad latte art, links to articles about sleep hygiene, jokes about my spreadsheet addiction. Then the pivot, little wedges that slid between me and James. He didn't answer for an hour? Must be nice having someone that free with your feelings. Or, protect yourself before you're blindsided. The truth is, she never told me to snoop. I did that myself. The way a person opens a new tab when they're bored, I opened James's phone while he napped. I checked his location when he said he'd be late. I scrutinized his calendar for clues. Each time I found nothing. I felt a lull of shame and then the itch to check again. Trust, but verify, I told myself, as if repeating the phrase could absolve me. Looking back, there were actual red flags, but they weren't about cheating. They were about me. The tallying, the tests, the quizzes he didn't know he was taking and could never pass because I'd keep changing the answer key. He'd come home with takeout, and I'd turn it into a trap. Did you remember the extra sauce? Did you remember me? There are only so many pop quizzes a person will take before they drop out of the class. Still, there were moments with edges. A work dinner falling on a Saturday night. A new passcode he swore IT required. A colleague's birthday drink he forgot to tell me about. Each one was plausible. Together, they set my whole body to alarm. I could have asked for reassurance kindly. I demanded evidence instead. When I told Olivia about the passcode, she replied within seconds, classic. They create distance to normalize secrets. I breathed that in like oxygen after a sprint. It propped up my fear and called it wisdom. Matt, by contrast, said, or he updated his phone because he's a grown-up, SAR. I told myself Matt didn't get it. Olivia got it. I started replaying conversations after the fact, analyzing cadence as if tone were affidavit. If he said later, did it mean hours or days? If he said we, did he mean us or a faceless we at work? I began asking questions I wouldn't want answered. Who were you texting? Why didn't you smile when I said that? James grew quieter, more careful. The space between us filled with my interpretations. One night, I paced our hallway waiting for him to come home. When his key finally turned, I launched into a cross-exam strong enough to make a judge wince. He stood in the doorway, rein on his shoulders, and said, I can't keep proving I'm not hiding things. That's not a life. Then he showered and slept on his side, facing the wall. I lay awake and counted cracks in the ceiling, one for each way I wished I had started differently. Olivia texted the next morning, don't apologize. If he wanted trust, he'd earn it. My stomach sank. Not because she was wrong, because I realized I wanted a different kind of advice and kept choosing hers anyway. But then came the message that detonated my certainty. A preview on James's screen from an unknown contact. 3 words ambiguous enough to be anything. Same time tomorrow? The message came from a number I didn't recognize, no name attached. Same time tomorrow? The rest of the thread was older, mostly logistics, meeting times, room numbers, a few calendar links. It read like planning, not flirting. The signature on one message made my breath catch. Dr. Patel, the psychologist James's company brought in during restructuring, the one who ran stress management groups. I stared at the screen until my pulse slowed from siren to hum. Therapy. He was going to therapy and hadn't told me. A new offense bloomed where fear had been. Why didn't he tell me? Then, almost immediately, a second thought, because you would have turned it into evidence against him. When he came home that night, I was ready to be brave. I saw a message from Dr. Patel. I said, keeping my voice even, "Are you getting help?" He paused, hand still on his bag, then nodded. "It's a group." I didn't want to make it a thing. "Why not tell me?" I asked, trying to keep accusation out of my tone and failing. He exhaled. "Because you weaponize information when you're scared, Sarah." I needed one space that wasn't about defending myself. The words stung because they were truer than I wanted to admit. I crossed my arms, a shield disguised as a posture. "So secrets are okay if they're healthy?" He looked past me toward the kitchen window. "It wasn't a secret. It was privacy. There's a difference." We ate in tired silence. At 9:12 p.m., as if on cue, Olivia pinged. "See? He's hiding a whole therapist. Who does that if not guilty?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hungry to return to the club where my anger felt righteous. But I put the phone face down and chose a different conversation. "Can I go with you next time?" I asked James. He smiled, small and sad. "It doesn't work like that." 2 nights later, his department hosted a dinner at a hotel restaurant with mirrors on every wall. I wore a navy dress and a necklace with a stubborn clasp. James seemed relieved to have me there, but the relief felt performative to me. Another sign I turned into proof. Midway through the meal, he stepped away to take a call. I watched the mirror and imagined every woman in the room reflected as a threat. When he returned, I let my fear speak. "Who was that?" "My mother," he said, surprised. "She wanted to know about Sunday." I half smiled and stabbed at my roasted carrots. When his colleague Lena joked that James was married to his work, I heard married to someone else. So when he put an arm around the back of my chair for the group photo, I said too loudly, "Don't touch me if you're going to touch other people too." The table went silent like a dropped glass. On the ride home, he was quiet, then said, "I'm out of ways to make you feel safe." I wanted to say hold me, but I said, "Prove it," which is not a sentence a heart can survive indefinitely. Later, Olivia texted, "I'd never tolerate secrets. If he cared, he'd show you everything." And for a minute, I let that sentence be my bed. I slept poorly on it. In the morning, James made coffee and placed a mug by my elbow. "I'm seeing Dr. Patel one-on-one," he said softly. "I need help with boundaries." My chest tightened because I heard what he meant. Boundaries with me. He didn't take much. 2 shirts, a sweater, the blue duffel that always smelled faintly of cedar. He stood by the door like a man hoping the house would negotiate. "I'm going to Matt's for a few days," he said. "I need some air." The sentence bent my knees. "You're leaving me," I said, "because drama is a way to feel in control when you're not." "I'm leaving the cycle," he said evenly. "I don't want us to become a courtroom. I love you. I can't do this version." When the door clicked, I slid down the wall and cried into my sleeves. My phone vibrated. "Olivia, space is step 1. Next he'll say he's happier without you." Matt, by contrast, texted an address and a time. "Come over at 6. We'll talk." Matt's apartment was a bachelor shrine to sports and plants. He handed me a bowl of chili and let me talk until my throat scraped. When I ran out of words, he said the thing only a sibling can say and survive. "You're pushing him away, Sar." I stared at him, stunned. "Whose side are you on?" He shrugged. "Yours. That's why I'm saying it." I slept at my own place that night because pride is stubborn. The bed felt cavernous, full of the James-shaped absence my brain kept trying to fill with suspicions. I woke to my phone chiming. A group chat, old friends from college, had devolved into advice. "Once a liar, always a liar," someone typed. Another, "Girl, life's short. Leave." None of them knew James. All of them knew certainty. On day 2, the apartment took on that post-argument smell, stale coffee, cold air, unwatered plant. I cleaned as if absolution lay under dust bunnies. On day 3, I stopped eating and started scrolling. Olivia sent links. Signs your partner is hiding a double life. Matt sent a voice memo. Please stop feeding the fear. Try silence. Silence, it turns out, is where fear throws a parade. I imagined James laughing with a coworker, imagined a hand on his sleeve, imagined a string of moments I decided were real because they hurt. Day 4, I caved. I texted, "Are you coming back?" He wrote, "I don't know." The words hollowed me. I typed, "Who is she?" then deleted it. I typed, "Can we talk?" He answered, "Tomorrow." I filled the hours by making a list titled what we were on one side and what we became on the other. On the left I wrote, Sunday pancakes, hand squeezes in grocery lines, his head on my lap when he was sick. On the right, timer arguments, calendar interrogations, my prove it mantra, his growing quiet. The right column was longer. I stared at it and hated myself. Then I justified every entry with a footnote. Then I hated myself for the footnotes. At 10 p.m., Olivia sent, "If you go soft now, you'll lose leverage." That word, leverage, made me feel like I'd traded marriage for marketing. I muted the thread. 10 minutes later, guilt made me unmute it. When we finally sat across from each other at our kitchen table, James looked like someone who'd seen his reflection and didn't entirely like it. "I want to try therapy, couples, if you're willing," he said. I nodded too fast and said, "Of course," then followed it with the sabotaging addendum. "As long as you agree to full transparency." His shoulders slumped. "Or," he said quietly, "as long as I agree to be surveilled." The screenshot was artfully cropped. A photo of James outside a cafe, time-stamped, standing too close to Lena from his office. Olivia's caption, "Open mouth laughing with her while you spiral. Wake up." I felt that first hot rush, the one that propels your thumbs to call, your mouth to accuse. But something snagged. The cafe's window reflected a street banner I knew belonged to a district across town from the office. The timestamp was during one of his Dr. Patel sessions. My stomach flipped, not with dread, but with doubt about my own doubt. "Where did you get this?" I typed. Olivia responded instantly, "A friend." "Don't ask who. Protect your source." Protect your source. I stared at the phrase. I wasn't a journalist. I was a woman who wanted not to be afraid. I wrote, "This looks edited." She left me on read for 15 minutes, then replied, "Believe me or stay blind." James was rinsing dishes, oblivious to the landmine glowing in my palm. I could detonate. Or I could ask, gently. I heard Dr. Patel's imagined voice, though I had never met her. "What outcome do you want?" I put the phone down. "Would you be willing to show me your calendar for next week?" I asked, trying to sound collaborative instead of carceral. He looked wary, then opened it. The session times matched the window on the photo. "Who sent you something?" he asked. "Not important," I said, which was another way to keep my addiction fed. He nodded, and the relief I felt was thin as paper and twice as easy to tear. That night, the unknown number texted again. "If you want the truth, look inward, then look at Olivia." I typed back, "Who are you?" No response. The next day, I met Matt at a diner. He listened while I laid out the exhibit called Reasons to Panic. He sipped his coffee and said, "Two things can be true. You can be spiraling, and someone can be stirring the water." I frowned. "Olivia's my friend." "Is she?" He tilted his head. "Friends don't hand you gasoline when you're already on fire." I wanted to defend her, but a memory flashed. Olivia leaning back on her couch, saying, "If he makes you doubt, make him sweat." It had felt like solidarity then. It felt like someone loving chaos now. On my way home, I detoured by James's office. Not to spy, at least that's what I told myself, but to see the place where his life happened without me. I watched him exit with 2 colleagues, laughing the soft way he laughs when he's comfortable. My heart hurt at the sight, because comfort without me felt like proof, even if it wasn't. He saw me, stopped, and walked over. "Want to grab a sandwich?" he asked. The invitation felt like a hand from a cliff. We sat on a bench and ate quietly. "I want us to work," he said. "But not if working means you need to hold my phone like a passport." "I don't want to," I said. "I just don't know how to stop." He nodded, and for the first time in months, I felt the shape of a path forming. Then my phone buzzed. "Olivia again, he's love bombing. Don't fall for it." "How do you know these things?" I typed. "Who is your friend?" She replied with a shrug emoji, and then, "We look out for each other." I hear things. The answer felt slippery. I scrolled back through months of our chats and noticed a pattern I had been too frantic to detect. Her tips always arrived when things between James and me softened, when we had a decent date night, when I'd stopped checking his phone for 3 blessed days. A compliment from James, a small joke shared, and ping, heads up, from Olivia. My fear wasn't random, it was scheduled. I started keeping a journal, not of his movements, but of my triggers. 8:15 p.m. He didn't text back for 40 minutes. Felt abandoned. 9:05 p.m. Olivia sent proof, right after he apologized for yesterday. Patterns emerged like hidden ink under heat. Every time I moved toward trust, Olivia gave me a reason to sprint back to suspicion. Every time I asked for reassurance softly, she handed me a cudgel. I brought the journal to Dr. Patel, the therapist James finally persuaded me to see on my own. It took me 4 tries to make the appointment. It took 1 minute sitting in her quiet office to cry. She didn't let me drown in it. Let's hold 2 truths, she said, voice like warm cloth. You learned to scan for danger because you were hurt before, and scanning became your identity. What would it be like to be a person without a radar for once? Unsafe, I said. And what would it be like to practice feeling unsafe without acting unsafe? She asked. The sentence fogged the glass on my certainty. After the session, I sat in my car and opened Olivia's thread. I typed, I need some space to figure out my part. She responded, your part is loving a liar. I didn't reply. Matt called that evening. How'd it go, he asked. I told him about the journal, the triggers, the way our friend felt suddenly less like a friend and more like a stage manager. He was quiet a moment, then said, I'm going to ask something rude. Does Olivia have a crush on your drama? I laughed and then didn't. I remembered the night she held my hand as I cried and said, I live for peeling truth. It had sounded noble. It sounded hungry now. 2 days later, the unknown number texted again. Check the metadata on her screenshots. I felt ridiculous, but I forwarded one to Matt, who forwarded it to a friend who does digital design. The friend responded, looks like the timestamp layer was edited. Could be nothing, or someone trying to make it look newer than it is. That night, James and I cooked together for the first time in weeks. Chopping onions, I told him I'd started therapy. His face softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. Thank you, he said. That means more than you think. We ate on the couch, knees touching. I didn't check his phone when he went to shower. I felt better than right. I felt clean. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Olivia, emergency. Call me. I stared at it until it stopped vibrating. A minute later, another text. A photo of James leaving a building at dusk, alone, hands in pockets. The caption, he's not where he says he is. My chest nodded, until I recognized the building. Dr. Patel's. The angle was from across the street. The realization landed with a cold clarity that cut through my usual panic. This wasn't intuition, it was surveillance. And not from me this time. Someone had followed James out of a therapist's office, taken a photo, and sent it to me dressed as concern. I called Olivia. She answered on the first ring. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I'm protecting you, she said, as if stating a fact. You're too soft-hearted. He's sneaking around. Where did you get that photo? A friend, she said again, that vague shield. Focus on what matters. What matters is you had someone watching my partner. That's not protective, that's invasive. She exhaled, a theatrical sound. Do you want to be safe or right? I want to be honest, I said, including about my own mess. Silence. Then, more softly. Sarah, without me you'd still be sleeping next to lies. After we hung up, I sat with the kind of shaking that comes after the danger, not during it. The room felt crowded with ghosts of narratives I'd chosen because they were louder than my own voice. I opened my journal and wrote 3 lines. I love James. I don't want to be a detective. I think Olivia needs my chaos to stay close. At the next session, Dr. Patel asked, what role does Olivia play in your story? She keeps me scared, I said. And when I'm scared, I feel powerful turning fear into action. What would staying be, if not scanning? Faith, I said, and the word felt both ridiculous and like a key turning in an old lock. After therapy, I walked to James's office and asked him to meet me downstairs. We sat on the concrete planter like teenagers. I told him everything. The screenshots, the edited metadata, the feeling that our friend had been feeding me doubt to keep me close. I expected fury or triumph. He just looked sad. I wish you trusted us more than the noise, he said gently. I'm trying, I said. I reached for his hand and didn't flinch when he hesitated before taking it. Hesitation was fair. We walked 3 blocks without talking. It felt like breathing through a paper bag. Awkward, necessary, strangely grounding. That night, my phone lit up again. This time with an email, not a text. Subject line, confidential. Information you may need. The sender was a throwaway address, but the body contained screenshots not of James, but of Olivia. Messages where she forwarded anonymous tips to a third party. Notes about keeping Sarah alert, and one line that punched the wind from me. If she calms down, I lose my seat at the table. I closed the laptop and pressed my forehead to my hands. The narrative I had clung to, that I was a guardian of my own heart, tilted. I had been a volunteer deputy in someone else's theater. I drafted the plan on a yellow legal pad because pens and paper felt safer than screens that could be forwarded, misread, or used against me. I didn't want another round of theater. I wanted daylight. Step 1. Document patterns. Not James's, not anymore, Olivia's. I screenshotted our messages, exported the chat, and printed the thread with timestamps. In margin notes, I marked the days James and I had quiet, decent evenings, and circled the precise minutes Olivia had urgent proof. The page looked like a weather map of manufactured storms. Step 2. Ask Matt for help with the technical pieces, metadata, EXIF data on images she sent, headers on the emails from that throwaway account. Step 3. Bring what I had to Dr. Patel so I wouldn't turn a confrontation into a confession booth for the wrong person. Step 4. Choose a setting where I could keep my voice and not lose my nerve. I told Matt first. He came over with 2 sparkling waters and the portable hard drive he calls the tiny vault. He skimmed my printouts, whistled low, and said, "Okay, this is organized. And not just regular Sarah organized. Courtroom organized." I laughed in spite of myself. "I want to be fair," I said. He nodded. "Then we prove, not guess." We found what we needed to quickly. On 2 of the screenshots Olivia had sent, the visible font of the timestamp didn't match the system font for that model phone. On another, the layer order suggested the banner at the top had been dragged from a prior capture. None of it would hold up as a felony in a courtroom, but it held up as a betrayal in a friendship. Matt said, "At best this is someone who loves drama. At worst, it's sabotage." I emailed Dr. Patel a summary so I wouldn't waste the first 10 minutes sobbing into my hands. She welcomed me into her office with the grace of someone who'd seen many storms and still believed in roofs. "What outcome do you want?" she asked after I laid out the documents like birds with broken wings. I said, "Clarity, and an end to this feedback loop where my fear feeds her and her fear feeds me." She nodded. "You also want repair," she said gently, and I winced because yes, I wanted repair with James. "Then any confrontation has to be about boundaries, not punishment," she said. "Hold the line without setting the house on fire." The hardest part was the James piece. I told him over phone at a quiet place on Pine that I needed to step back from Olivia, and I needed him to step out of the middle. "I have to own what's mine," I said. He didn't cheer or gloat. He simply said, "Thank you," and asked how he could help. I said, "Show up for the truth without making a show of it." He smiled, tired but sincere. For the first time in months, we had the shape of a shared project. Not my surveillance of him, but our defense against a narrative that had swallowed us both. To stage the conversation with Olivia, I chose a neutral place where corners wouldn't feel like traps. A sunlit coffee shop with 2 mini windows and a barista who writes poetry on cups. I asked Matt to sit 2 tables away as my sanity anchor, not my security detail. I rehearsed my opening line in the mirror. "I care about you, and I can't do this version of us anymore." I planned my 3 proof points and my 1 boundary. I promised myself I wouldn't drift into apology because kindness is not capitulation, and I had given enough of those already. I wanted truth, not victory, distance, not detonation. Still, I was afraid. Afraid of losing my oldest friend in town. Afraid of seeing myself reflected in her face as the woman who let fear steer the car. Afraid that, once the smoke cleared, the bridge to James would still be gone. Dr. Patel had given me a sentence to hold in my palm like a stone. You can grieve what was and refuse what is at the same time. I repeated it until it almost felt like strength. The night before the meeting, a text from the unknown number arrived. If you want her truth, ask one question. What do you get when I am scared? I copied the line onto my legal pad, circled it, and set my alarm for morning. I slept dreamless for the first time in months. She looked beautiful in that practiced way. Hair smooth as a promise, lipstick calibrated to read as power without aggression. You look tired, she said by way of hello, which in our friendship was code for let me take the wheel. I sat, set my phone face down, and folded my hands so I wouldn't start wringing them like a student with the wrong answer. I asked you here because I need to change how we talk, I began. Her smile thinned. He got to you, she said, and it was almost affectionate, like the cult has a new recruit. I shook my head. No, I got to me, and Dr. Patel helped. She rolled her eyes at the name. Therapy is where people learn better words for the same delusions, she said lightly. Matt coughed at his table, a sound like a gavel. I kept my focus on my side of the table. I have some questions, I said, sliding a printout of our chat toward her. Why did your warnings always arrive when James and I were reconnecting? Why do the screenshots you sent have edited timestamps? Why did you send me a photo of him leaving a therapist's office taken from across the street? She didn't flinch. Because you won't protect yourself unless someone pushes you, she said. I did what needed to be done. It was so sincere I felt nauseous. What do you get when I'm scared? I asked, the question from the unknown number, disguised as my own. What do you receive, attention, access, a role, when I'm in crisis? For the first time, a hairline crack crossed her face. I get to keep you, she said softly. And I had to close my eyes because somewhere in there was the girl who brought me soup when I had the flu and braided my hair before interviews. Then the crack sealed. She leaned forward. He is not safe for you. Men like him say boundaries when they mean control. I kept you from wasting a decade. She sat back like a surgeon, pleased with her incision. By lying? I asked. By staging proof? She shrugged. By saving you. Her voice warmed. And if you're asking what I get to not be the friend who watched you drown. The line was both tender and self-serving. I could feel its twin threads pulling me in opposite directions. My phone buzzed. James's name on the screen, a picture of his shoulder pressed to mine from better months. Olivia's gaze darted to it, then up to my face. Don't answer that, she said. He'll talk you into softness. I picked up the phone and turned it over. Softness is not a sin, I said. She laughed once. Tell that to your future self when he cheats. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, the one that leads to ultimatums I can't keep. Matt shifted in his seat, a reminder that I could choose a different move. I said, I love you, and I can't be in a friendship that requires me to be afraid to keep your love. Her mouth twisted. You're choosing him over me, she said, the oldest accusation in the Book of Triangles. I'm choosing me, I said quietly. And me wants truth more than drama. For a second, I thought she might say, I'm sorry. Instead, she went for the artery. You don't know how to love without control, she said. You'll be back when he proves me right. The sentence hit my solar plexus dead on. It was the most accurate insult I'd ever received. I stood, because sitting would turn my spine to water. I won't be back to this version of us, I said, and I meant it even though my throat burned with grief. Outside, the winter light was indifferent and honest. Matt fell in a step beside me. You okay? He asked. No, I said, and yes. He nodded. That's called being alive. James called that evening. How did it go? He asked. I told the truth, I said, and I let something in so something else can begin. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I booked us a couples session if you're still willing. I said yes, then added, but I need to stop running recon every time I feel fear. He said, I'll try to meet you where you are without laying down on the tracks. That night, I finally slept. In the morning, Olivia's name popped up with a single message. Last chance to save yourself from him. I muted the thread and went to make coffee. By noon, she had escalated from concern to threat. If you don't listen, I'll make sure you learn the hard way. The email landed in James's inbox at 9:42 a.m., forwarded by his manager with the dry line you use when you're afraid of HR. Can you clarify this? Attached were the same doctored images I'd seen, mismatched fonts, suspicious crops, now stitched into a narrative about inappropriate behavior during company hours. The sender, predictably, was a burner account. The timing, predictably, was immediately after I set my boundary with Olivia. James called me from a stairwell that echoed like a confession booth. "I didn't do anything," he said, breath hitching. "I know," I said, and the relief of speaking that sentence in that direction almost knocked me to my knees. "We're going to handle this with facts." We needed a room where truth could be bigger than performance. I called Matt and asked him to bring the tiny vault. I emailed Dr. Patel to ask if she'd provide a note confirming James's session times. I printed the metadata analysis in our chat logs with highlighted points where Olivia had delivered proof directly after we'd made progress. Then I asked James to request a meeting with his manager and HR, not to plead, but to show. "We move like adults," I told myself. No scenes, no spinning. The mantra felt like a new muscle flexing. In the conference room, the air had that manufactured citrus smell of corporate damage control. James's manager sat with the polite squint of someone calculating risk. The HR rep had her laptop open, fingers poised to type the version of the story that would go in the file. I nodded, palms sweating but steady. "We'd like to present context," I said, and I saw James's shoulders relax a fraction at we. Matt slid the packet across the table, tabs neat enough to make my high school English teacher proud. "First, the images," I said. "As you'll see, the timestamps are inconsistent with the device overlay. The angles show they weren't captured by the alleged sender, but by someone else across the street." I handed over the Dr. Patel note. "Second, the times align with therapy appointments your company arranged and encouraged." I saw the HR rep's eyebrows lift at that and took it as permission to keep breathing. James spoke then, not to defend his character. He knows that never works, but to state facts. "I am in stress counseling for the restructuring. I left the building for those sessions with permission. I have not engaged in any inappropriate relationships with coworkers." He didn't look at me, and somehow that made me trust him more. This wasn't a performance for my benefit. "Third," I said, sliding the chat log forward. "Here is a record of coordinated messages from a third party who has been sending doctored material to my phone and, now, to your office. We will not speculate about motives here. We will only ask that you evaluate the documentation." HR's typing slowed, which in HR means we hear you. The meeting ended with careful sentences about investigations and appreciation for our cooperation. When we stepped into the hallway, James sagged against the wall. "Thank you," he said, "for showing up differently." I swallowed. "I'm practicing," I said, and he brushed my knuckles with his in a gesture that felt like a preface to something worth reading. But practice doesn't inoculate you from backlash. An hour later, my phone lit with a new message from the burner address that had sent James's boss the email. The subject line, "You made me do this." The body, "If you won't listen to me privately, I will protect you publicly." Attached was a draft email to my own manager, full of insinuations about my emotional instability and inappropriate workplace conduct, complete with cherry-picked texts pasted without context. Matt looked over my shoulder and swore softly. "She's escalating," he said. "Or whoever this is." We both knew who this was. I asked Dr. Patel for one more favor. Could she sit with me in a short meeting with Olivia, not as a therapist to either of us, but as a neutral witness to a conversation about harm? She said yes, with conditions. "The goal is not confession. The goal is clarity. You will state your boundary. You will not litigate her childhood." We booked a small conference room at my building after hours. Glass walls, bright lights, no corners to trap anyone. Matt waited downstairs in the lobby, knitting his eyebrows into the shape of a guardrail. I printed one page with 3 sentences and put it in my pocket. "I love the history we share. I will not participate in manipulative communication. If you continue contacting my employer or James's, we will pursue legal protection." "Unexpected," she said, gesturing toward Dr. Patel with a small tilt of her chin. "I thought this was between us." Dr. Patel folded her hands. "I'm here as a witness and to model a different kind of conversation," she said. "Sarah will speak first. You'll each have time. We will not shout." Olivia laughed once. "Hi, Brittle. Therapy rules," she said. "Cute." I started with what was true and not weaponized. "You were my first call for so many things," I said. "The apartment hunting, the flu, the time my car died in a snowstorm. I'm grateful for that girl in both of us." Olivia's jaw relaxed a millimeter, expecting perhaps a door to wedge open. I kept mine steady. "And I have evidence that you edited screenshots," that you or someone acting at your request took surveillance photos of James, and that you sent those to his employer in a way that jeopardized his job. She did not deny it. She exhaled like someone bored by a documentary. He's bad for you, she said. I did what a real friend does. A real friend doesn't threaten to email my boss with half-truths, I said softly, sliding the printed burner email across the table. She glanced at it, shrugged, then pushed it back with a fingertip. If you won't listen to me, the world will teach you, she said. She had the serene conviction of a person who believes her ends bleach her means. What do you get when I am scared? I asked again. She met my eyes, and for a second I saw something honest and aching. A seat, she said, so quietly I almost missed it. Permission to matter. Dr. Patel's gaze didn't flicker. Is there another way for you to matter here except as Sarah's alarm system? She asked. Olivia's mouth hardened. Not with him in the picture, she said. He takes the room. Or, I said, maybe I gave him the room because I was so busy searching it for exits I never let anyone else sit. Saying it didn't absolve her. It absolved me from thinking this could only be her fault or his. I felt my spine realign by a degree. I put the 3-sentence paper on the table and read it without looking up. I will not be in a friendship that requires me to be afraid. If you contact my employer or James's again, we will seek a restraining order. I wish you healing separate from me. My voice shook at the last sentence because endings should tremble a little to prove they are real. Olivia stared at me like I'd spoken a dialect she couldn't parse. Then she smiled with every tooth. You think you've grown, she said. You've just switched brands of control. She stood. Good luck when he proves me right. She reached for the door. Dr. Patel said, wait, with the even authority of a metronome stopping a room. Before you leave, I need you to understand the consequence Sarah named. She tapped the paper. This is not a threat, it is a boundary. If you cross it, a court will become part of this conversation. Olivia's nostrils flared. For the first time that night, I saw fear, not superiority. She left without slamming anything, which somehow felt louder. I sat, breathed, shook. Dr. Patel said, you did that without dehumanizing her or yourself. I nodded, tears finally free to fall without fueling a fire. What if she's right, though? I asked. What if I relapse into control? What if James leaves for good? Dr. Patel smiled, not the comforting smile of a lie, but the steady one of a practiced truth. Relapses are data, she said, and leaving is a risk in every love. Growth doesn't erase risk, it lets you hold it without weaponizing it. In the lobby, Matt squeezed my shoulders. Proud of you, he said. Also, your therapist is terrifying in the best way. We laughed like people who had found a safe exit. James met me at home with tea and the plant he'd repotted because, he said, the roots were choking themselves. I looked at the plant, at the fresh soil, at the man who had stood through a storm without building a Twitter thread about the rain. I want to try again, I said. But I need us to agree on a rule. No more making fear holy. He nodded. Deal, he said, and clinked his mug against mine. The confession was not the neat bow I fantasized about. It was a single paragraph, jittery and grandiose. I did what I had to do because she would not hear me otherwise. He will hurt her. I did not send anything to her boss, but I did to his because he has power. I accept your boundary. Do not contact me again. No signature, but the cadence was pure Olivia. I forwarded it to a folder labeled if needed, and then, for the first time since the first fight, I put my phone in a drawer. Fallout can be slow and dignified or fast and messy. Ours was both. James's HR closed their inquiry with a memo praising his cooperation and reiterating their mental health policies, which was corporate for we will not be sued for discouraging therapy. James didn't crow. He just made an omelet and kissed my temple. My manager called me in for a routine check-in and asked, neutral as Switzerland, if everything was settled at home. I said, I'm getting help, and watched respect settle in her expression like a paperweight. We agreed on a lighter load for 2 weeks. Olivia went dark on social media. No cryptic quotes, no subtweets. A mutual friend texted to say she'd taken a digital break. I didn't excavate for more. Sometimes peace is just refusing to dig. But cleaning up the inside of my life took more than memos and silence. The first couple session with Dr. Patel felt like climbing a mountain in a windbreaker. James said he needed a no-ask window after work. 30 minutes where I didn't pepper him with questions the second he crossed the threshold. I asked for the right to say, "I'm spiking," without it becoming a trial. We practiced the sentence like a muscle. He practiced saying, "I'm here," without solving or defending. We both practiced failing and apologizing and trying again. I told Matt I was afraid of becoming boring without the adrenaline of suspicion. He laughed until I laughed. "Imagine calling peace boring," he said. "That's how you know you've lived in chaos too long." So I put boredom on my list of things to court. Long walks with nothing to diagnose, a jigsaw puzzle, a novel that wasn't about catastrophe. It felt like withdrawal. And then it felt like breath. There were setbacks. A late meeting. An unreturned text. A weekend plan canceled because James's mother needed him. Old me would have spun the wheel of doom. New me texted, "Okay, I'm disappointed. Let's plan Tuesday." He answered, "Thank you. Yes, Tuesday. I want that." It wasn't cinematic. It was better. 2 weeks into the new truce, I passed the cafe where Olivia and I had sat and felt a tug so strong I had to grip a parking meter. The tug wasn't for her. It was for the version of me that believed crisis made me relevant. I stood there until the tug passed. Then I bought a pastry and took it to James's office as a surprise. He came down and looked at me like a man who had weathered a winter and saw crocuses. We ate on a bench. I said, "Do you think we can become people we haven't met yet?" He said, "I think we already are." He admitted he had sometimes let my fear lead because it kept him from having to show up vulnerable. I admitted that power felt like safety even when it was killing me. We toasted to the stupid bravery of saying the quiet part out loud. That night, I opened the drawer and took out my phone. I deleted the thread with the burner account. I scrolled to Olivia's name, hovered, then archived instead of blocked. Mercy without access, Dr. Patel had called it. I like the sound of that. Mercy is not a key. It is a closed door with the light left on. The next morning, I woke to sunshine that didn't look like a lie. I made coffee and wrote a note to my future self, a woman I hoped would read it with a smile. "You are not a detective. You are a person who loves and is loved, imperfectly and honestly. When fear tries to hire you, decline the job." I stuck it to the fridge under a magnet shaped like a tiny bridge. He didn't drop to one knee or pull out velvet. There was no theater. He leaned on the balcony rail beside me, the city's soft noise below, and said, "Do you want to make a new promise with me?" My body flooded with heat. Not romance heat. Fear heat, because promises had been weapons in my hands before. "What kind of promise?" I asked, voice steady by practice alone. He looked at the sky instead of at me. "A promise that we choose curiosity over control," he said. "That we say when we're spiking instead of weaponizing the spike. That we keep therapy even when things feel fine. That we don't invite spectators into our arguments." He paused. "And that if we fail, we repair without adding interest." I laughed at the interest line and then cried at all of it. "I can't promise to never relapse," I said. "I can promise to notice when I do sooner." He nodded. "That's the kind I want." Then, after a long quiet, "I still want to marry you someday, Sarah. But first I want to marry the process." It was the least cinematic and most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. I told Dr. Patel about it that week. She smiled like someone watching a seed sprout. "Ritualize it," she said. "Make a small ceremony for yourselves, private, to mark the shift." So we did. On a Sunday, we turned off our phones, wrote down 5 lines each about how we'd hurt and how we'd try. Read them aloud on the same balcony where we'd argued and apologized and learned to breathe again. We put the papers in an envelope and slid it between 2 cookbooks like a promise you might reach for on a hungry night. Matt came over for dinner and made a toast that was half roast because that's his love language. To Sarah, who retired from the Department of Internal Affairs, he said, and we clinked glasses. Later he helped me box a few knickknacks that belonged to the era of suspicion, tiny trackers I'd bought, but never activated, a notebook full of tallies. We recycled the paper. We returned the trackers. We kept one thing, the little vault. Not for dirt, for photos of us laughing like people who knew how to be in a room together again. Olivia didn't reappear. A mutual friend said she'd started volunteering with a crisis hotline. I wished her well from the quiet of my living room. Mercy without access. There were days I missed the adrenaline. That embarrassed me. Dr. Patel told me the nervous system gets addicted to spikes. It takes time to teach it the pleasure of calm. So I practiced. I watched a kettle boil without checking my phone. I sat through the first 10 minutes of uncertainty without building a story. I told James, I'm scared right now and it's not your job to fix it, and then let him hold my hand anyway. On a Friday in spring, he took me to the bookstore cafe where we met. The barista had new hair and the same smile. We picked out 3 paperbacks and sat by the window. I like how you think, he said again, the sentence that once felt like a charm. This time I let it be a compliment, not a contract. When we got home, we found a small box on our doormat. No note. Inside, a keychain with a tiny bridge. I turned it in my hand and smiled. Mercy without access, indeed. I put it on my keys because bridges are built to be crossed, not stared at from the shore. That night on the balcony, James said, I have one more promise request. He smiled like a man who had learned to ask instead of demand. When we tell our story, can we make the villain a pattern, not a person? I thought about Olivia, about my old self, about how easy it would be to live fueled by resentment. Then I nodded. Yes, I said, because the pattern is what we fought. We lit a candle. The city breathed. Somewhere a neighbor laughed. I rested my head on his shoulder and, for once, didn't try to figure out what the next sound meant. When I look back now, I can trace the shape of every mistake. I see the nights I scrolled through James's phone while he slept, searching for ghosts. I hear Olivia's voice whispering poison into my doubts. I remember Matt's blunt words, "You're pushing him away," and how I bristled instead of listening. Most of all, I see myself, a woman so desperate for certainty that I created the very chaos I feared. It's strange, writing this as if it's just another Reddit post. But that's what I did every day in my head. Posted my pain, my paranoia, my shame, and waited for invisible strangers to confirm my worst fears. The truth is, I didn't need James to betray me. I had already betrayed myself by refusing to trust, refusing to be honest, and refusing to take responsibility for my own wounds. Healing wasn't fast. It wasn't pretty. Therapy meant sitting across from Dr. Patel and admitting things I had never said out loud. I was jealous. I told him once, my voice cracking. I was controlling. I was the storm. He didn't flinch. He just nodded and said, acknowledgement is the first step toward not repeating it. Matt stayed close. He called me out when I tried to backslide into old habits. Don't rewrite the story to make James the villain, he'd say. You can learn from this, or you can repeat it. Harsh, yes, but I needed harsh. I needed honesty. I don't know where James is now. Sometimes I imagine him happy, maybe with someone who gives him the trust one couldn't. Sometimes that thought hurts, but mostly it reminds me why I have to keep growing. I can't undo what I did, but I can refuse to do it again. So here's my advice for anyone who's where I was. Pay attention to the voice in your head. Ask yourself if it's really yours, or if it's someone else's fears and bitterness creeping in. Don't let insecurity dictate your choices. Don't let paranoia masquerade as intuition. And don't wait until love has walked out the door to realize you've been your own worst enemy all along. Because sometimes the villain isn't the person across from you. It's the one staring back in the mirror.